Good morning, everybody. If the translators need a little bit more time, I've been told I speak a little bit too fast, so just let me know. My name is Kabir Kassam. Let me do a quick introduction on myself, and then we'll dive into the presentation a little bit. Professionally, my background for the past 6 years has been education and the tutoring industry specifically. I myself own a chain of learning centers called the Brilliance Academy of Math and English. We have about 900 centers across the United States, and we serve 15,000 students, is my professional background. From the NTA standpoint, the National Tutoring Association has been around for about 18 years at this point. We started off with offering an approach to tutoring and certification for college professionals and professionals who tutor at the college level. We soon found out that the need for this association and the need for the certification expanded beyond just the college arena. And that's when we expanded and offered to parents, to students, to high school students. Anyone who wanted to become a certified tutor could now do so using the National Tutoring Association certification model. Currently, we have about 15,000 members that have gone through this certification process. Of course, this is over the course of 18 years. Today, as far as what I know, that George has invited me, thank you very much for the delegation's invitation to the National Tutoring Association. We're very happy to be here with the likes of you all and with Mohan and with George and everyone. We hope that we can contribute to the model that you are trying to put together for the European Union. And we think it's a very important model to do so. We've done it about 18 years ago, but we always are revamping that model. We're redoing that model for new markets and new segments. As George mentioned, within the shadow and the challenges of education, there's new markets that come about, the whole online boom, and we'll talk a little bit about that as well. What I wanted to do from a tutoring in the United States is give you a little bit of a background of where the U.S. has been within tutoring, and then we can try and tailor that to how it may be useful to this morning's and then later to this afternoon's discussions as well. What I want to do is talk about the perceived value of education and the value of tutoring specifically within the United States. The segmentation of it, as far as how many different segments, public, private, so on and so forth. We'll talk a little bit about the privatization of tutoring. And in the past, as I'm sure you know, of the infamous No Child Left Behind Act. And we'll talk a lot about that. That happens to be my expertise within that area, and then which was advented in 2001, which is now coming up to a sunset clause in 2014. So there's been some fury of changes coming about, especially with the regime change from a Republican regime where this was enacted to a Democratic Secretary of Education, and of course the President as well. And we'll try and touch a little bit on the future of tutoring as far as the NTA sees it and how we think that will be helpful to the European Union and to UNESCO. The perceived value of tutoring, I was going through this report just to refresh myself as well, and it's, we were reading proportionally how much states and countries spend on tutoring. In the U.S., we exceeded about $10 billion in tutoring just in last year. That's quite a bit of money, and that's primarily in the private sector. The U.S. government spending estimated just from NCLB, which is the No Child Left Behind, and SES, which stands for Supplemental Educational Service. So if there's any acronyms, by the way, you don't understand, please feel free, and I'll try to clarify as much as I can. The No Child Left Behind itself is slated to spend $2 billion a year, and it has been doing that for the past, I want to say, at least 4 years. It took a while to ramp up to that pace, but now they spend consistently $2 billion on just SES. Despite the spending the tutoring is receiving, tutoring in the United States is viewed as a corrective measure. Now, my background is not as good in the world tutoring organizations as well, but as my background is from my mother being from Pakistan and my father being from Madagascar, I know that tutoring in our house was not considered a corrective measure. It was something that you did because you wanted to get ahead. That is not the mentality within the United States. If you go to tutoring, you have already failed. That means you're going there to correct something. And that's a cultural paradigm shift that an NTA and that we as tutors must bring about. I'm not sure if that's as much of an issue in the other countries as it is in the United States. The segmentation that I think George mentioned as well is, one of the things that we have in the United States is companies such as Sylvan Learning Centers, as Huntington Learning Centers, who charge in the upwards of between $50 and $60 per hour for tutoring. And that's quite a hefty price to pay for a person for having just tutoring lessons. Now, that brings it to the point where tutoring is only for the rich. And that's where the NCLB, with its good intentions when it first came about, was to really bring the entire section of tutoring to the underprivileged. Because this notion of tutoring is only for the rich existed for quite some time. So what the NCLB tried to do was to bring tutoring not just to the rich, so Sylvans of the world, the Huntingtons of the world, all of these different organizations were now allowed to be certified by the government to provide the same exact service and at the same cost to John A. Smith, to Jane A. Smith, to be able to do that while the taxpayers are picking up the bills. So that, of course, increased in the boom of tutoring, because now no longer Sylvan and Huntington had the market. These two duopolies were now susceptible to any fly-by-night tutoring company coming into the ways and saying, I want to become a tutor, here is my pedagogy, you cannot differentiate this pedagogy from anybody else's, so you have to approve me. And based on the laws and the strict requirements within the United States, you cannot reject anyone on if you don't have a specific claim to go against it. So rather than to have that controversy, what ended up happening is that a lot of tutoring agencies became certified. And when they became, with anything, when a lot of, there's an influx of anything in an arena, you know that the quality may suffer. And that's where NTA saw a very big role, saying, there's an influx of tutoring companies who call themselves professionals, yet there's no certification whatsoever. That's where the National Tutoring Association went after this SES market. Not saying that we had too much success on it, but we did offer our capability and said, if you're going to offer these services, at the very least, be certified. If you're not certified by the National Tutoring Association, be certified by someone as a valid tutor. Because the definition of what is a tutor differs in everyone's mind as well. The other segmentation that ended up happening is private schools and companies themselves. So, for example, if there's, I'm not sure how the educational system works here in Vienna or anywhere else, but we have districts. So small districts are then responsible for the schools who the students go to. So these districts themselves saw a very good opportunity and started to become SES providers and tutoring companies, which was kind of like the fox watching the hen house, if you will. Because as George mentioned, that deflates their integrity, if you will. Because if they're failing them during the 9-to-5 course day, what says that they can actually provide good tutoring on an after-school time frame when they're being paid additional to? So that was another challenge that we had to come through as well, and we're hoping to address that with this delegation and with our works as well. And then the last segmentation was public entities and not-for-profit agencies in the market. Folks who weren't really in the education industry, people like churches. So churches said, great, there's this big bag of money out there that we're going to go after, and we're going to try to get after this $2 billion. Forget about the $10 billion in the private market. We just want this little segment of $2 billion because that's what the government pays, and that's guaranteed money. So they went after this particular market. So now you have churches, you have synagogues, you have temples who have no business being in education, are now certified and tutoring their kids. Now, sometimes that tutoring ends up being babysitting, but that's something that was quite a large challenge for us. And as you see, and when we get to the NCLB, you'll see now that there was a influx of SES providers, and now there's a quite a bit of a plateau about 2 or 3 years ago, and now there's a very severe drop of SES providers coming in. Just as any bubble, this bubble will burst as well. So what I wanted to do is as a part of this exercise today and in the afternoon, one of the things that we should be aware of is not to underestimate the challenges of tutoring. Obviously, Mark Bray's report does a lot of that for us. But from an entrepreneurial standpoint and from a business standpoint, we must look at that as well. Not just from a pedagogical standpoint, which is definitely important. But if we can't make sense of tutoring for the private industry, it will not work. Right? So that's something that we have to very closely take a look at, which is management challenges. One of the challenges that a lot of these companies received, and I've done consulting positions for many of these companies. In fact, we actually, as Brilliance Academy, we grew within a matter of 6 years, not through just organic growth, but through acquisition growth. At some points, I walked into an SES provider and a tutoring company and said, wow, you guys have some great management challenges. Instead of just fixing it, I'm going to buy you out and just put you as a part of my management strategy. So we've done that in the past as well. But one of the things that people continuously underestimate is the management challenges because, in fact, when you are a tutor, you don't have one customer. You have multiple customers. You've got the parent, who is a customer who needs to be reported to. You've got the child, who's the most important of all. And then, in our case, you have the government or the paying authority or the district or the school that we have to additionally report to in their methodology and their approach. And we served about 327 districts. And believe you me, every district had a different report. So we had to technologically innovate quickly so that we could provide the same data in 327 different languages to these folks. The second of which is the underestimation of the cost of operations. Now, people think that, okay, great, I need a desk, I need a paper, and I need a pen. That is not the case for tutoring. For tutoring, you need a lot more than just that, including certification. How to be a licensed certified author, how to have the different application processes, the entire administrative role that goes behind educators, and I know there's a lot of educators in this room, so no offense intended, but what I've been told is educators don't make good administrators. And that's something that we must be cognitive of, because if there's an educator, they must be paired up with a decent administrator, or at least have some administration skills so that they can manage the process of the student just as much logistically as they do educationally as well. The other common mistake that folks usually make is that there is a very large margin of profits in tutoring. Because if you just look at the Sylvan and the Prometrics of it, great, they charge $50 per student, they have 4 students, and they have 1 teacher. So they pay this teacher $12 an hour, they have $200 coming in on their top line money. Now let's say they have another $82 or something of additional expenses. That leaves them 50% profit. That's not the case, right? There's other business entities that go into this. There's other licensing costs, insurance costs, everything else that goes into that. So that margin, if you're getting to that 15 to 20% margin, that's a sweet spot of any business for that matter, not just in education as well. But most people look at this and say, great, we've got a huge profit margin, let's dive in without thinking about it. And that's where a lot of mistakes tend to happen as well. And the last one I want to mention is mixing of public schools and private expectations. Not sure if this is an issue that we need to concern ourselves with with this particular exercise, but at least in the United States, we have had a huge issue between seeing tutoring as a non-threatening approach. Because when I walk in as a tutor to a school, again, because of what we mentioned, because tutoring has this stigma of being a corrective measure, when I walk in as the head of tutoring into a school that's been teaching, they automatically think that they failed. And we must re-educate and retrain them to say, look, we're here to help you get your students to the next level, not to say that you failed in doing anything whatsoever. So there's an expectation alignment that needs to happen with all of your multiple management companies and your multiple management partners that we talked about. And this is where I want to shift over and talk about the No Child Left Behind Act. Not sure if any of you have actually seen this diagram, but the way that the initial, now this is No Child Left Behind was about a 400-page document. So if we can summarize that in one slide, this is it. So that document being summarized, basically the way that this happens is that it is a punitive measure against teachers and against schools and districts. So if you were to fail, AYP is the number that you see back there, the letters that you see. AYP stands for Adequate Yearly Progress. The way that No Child Left Behind has set it is that adequate yearly progress, which means you have to progress in an adequate manner every year. Now, ridiculously, the No Child Left Behind has set the adequate yearly progress